Hey, it's Gianni. There's a spoiler warning, and here's why Kalank is basically Titanic. So, you know how Kalank was trying to be this epic revenge tale that was supposed to crescendo into a tragic love triangle? Well, it wasn't. For those that actually watched it, you may or may not have noticed that it was really just a semi-melodramatic love story between Zafar and Roop, aka Jack and Rose. And in case you need more setup, you can think of the angry mob as the iceberg, the ship is the Chaudhry family, and Kunal Khemu as the Atlantic Ocean? Hey, seriously though, in Titanic, Rose feels trapped because she's engaged to this prick who's not only emotionally and physically abusive, but he thinks that Monet and Degas are trash. And the only reason why Rose is engaged to him in the first place is because her mother coaxed her into doing so just to pay off family debt. You see the same thing in Kalank in how Roop's obligation to marry Dev is basically familial too. And right after they get married, Dev pretty much tells her that he's not down to have sex because he loves his first wife. And good for him, but bad for Roop, because now she feels eternally trapped in a miserable marriage, hence considers killing herself by jumping off a ledge like somebody else we know. Now enter Zafar, who's not only Jack, but jacked. Though he's not much of an artist, he does make swords. And instead of gambling at poker, Zafar likes to gamble with his life trying to ride an awful looking CGI bull. You know, I thought the movie was solid until it got to this scene. That bull had to have been in violation of some sort of animal rights for looking so terrible. Anyway, what really relates Zafar and Jack is that they both swoop in to show our female heroines what it means to live freely despite being poor. We see this in Jack taking Rose down to the working class level of the ship, while Zafar shows Roop around the working class part of town. And ultimately, they're both hinting to our heroines that even though there can be a lot at stake for breaking an undesirable marriage commitment, the cost of doing so may be worth it if it means preserving one's livelihood. And that sums up Act 1 for both movies, which, by the way, also features Rose and Roop narrating the story from the future. Fun fact, did you know old Rose in Titanic was 100 years old? Literally 100. Whereas old Roop here couldn't have been more than 30, since she was telling the story from the 50s. I have a feeling that this 70-year age difference might explain why Titanic won Best Picture, and Kalank will be lucky to break 4 out of 10 on IMDb. Okay, so in Act 2 right now, Jack and Rose are spending tons of time together, and their favorite thing to do is exploring the Titanic. So much so that they actually run out of places to explore. And this is important because it marks a permanent change to Rose's character, which will help her when she is tested later on. Now, you might be tempted to think that Zafar with his thirst for revenge is a meaningful difference between the two movies, but I'm here to tell you that it's not, because the movie takes care of that rather quickly. In Act 2 of Kalank, we see Zafar's mom, Bahar, pleading with Zafar to drop his scheme for revenge, which to the detriment of the story, it actually works. Cause after that, the guilt that Zafar felt for deceiving Roop shames him into avoiding her. This makes Roop become more assertive because she wants to know why she's being ghosted. Now you gotta keep in mind here that even though Roop and Zafar are not together at this point like Jack and Rose are, they are still growing closer. This is made clear in two ways. The first is how Roop convinces that one dude to finally buy swords off Zafar, and second, Zafar stops himself from kissing that side hoe that he has because he realizes that he actually cares about Roop. So you see, since Zafar is no longer out for revenge this early in the movie, the main plot is still Titanic. Now look, I wouldn't blame you if you said that the middle of these two movies are nothing alike, because in the second act, Titanic uses this time to only focus on 3 things: Jack and Rose, Cal's distaste for Jack and Rose, and what causes the ship to eventually hit the iceberg. Whereas Kalank's second act focuses not just on Zafar and Roop, but it had to also develop Abdul's beef with the Chaudhrys, while incorporating Zafar's mom and dad into the story itself. And it doesn't end there, because Satya had to finally die in order for Dev and Roop to actually be a thing. So you say, see Gianni, with Kalank's second act being packed with so much more stuff, how can you claim that they're the same? To which I say, you're right, they're not the same. And that's why Titanic is the better movie. Because as we enter the third act of Kalank, we see that the only characters we ever cared about have always been Zafar and Roop. Alright, finishing up. In Act 3, Titanic is lit. The ship is officially sinking and the ship decks are in complete chaos. We also get to see Rose's character growth being tested as she basically becomes an action hero. She punches a guy in the nose, breaks Jack's handcuffs with an axe with her eyes closed, and then jumps off a lifeboat because she would rather die with Jack than be without him. The same thing basically happens in Kalank, except instead of Roop demonstrating her growth, it's Zafar. First he finds out that his item song dance buddy is Roop Chaudhry. Then he gets slapped by his deadbeat dad. And finally, he's attacked by his friend's posse pretending to be working for the Chaudhrys. Like a real hero though, Varun just brushes it all off because this ain't nothing compared to what he experienced in October. Now, the next day, Zafar wakes up to a cozy little bonfire made out of Chaudhry newspapers, which means our iceberg of protesters are now committed to sinking the Chaudhrys. So then Zafar runs to Roop's place because he senses that she might be in trouble. The two then take this freaking gladiator chariot to rescue Dev because for some reason he really likes working. The protesters then chase our protagonist all the way to the train station. And here, ladies and gents, is where we see the ultimate Titanic reference, the door. As Dev and Roop find a vacant door on one of the train cars, Roop calls out to Zafar commanding him to get on the train, to which he obliges. But as Zafar runs past train car after train car, he doesn't bother looking for any other doors because like Jack, he's now way too focused on holding Roop's hands. And look, I can't really hate on the guy because Alia Bhatt does have nice hands. If you're into palm reading, she has the perfect set of water hands. Plus, look what they can do. Unfortunately, with the emotional weight of 2 movies, Zafar dies a death that was all too familiar. So as Roop rides into the distance, we spring forward into the future where both Rose and Roop closes their eyes and wish that James Cameron had directed. Hey, so that's all folks. Thanks so much for watching. And you know, I gotta say, I actually didn't hate this movie as much as most of you probably did, because I do get some guilty pleasure out of watching these almost campy movies that are very self-gratifying and overinflated. And honestly, I think that's the same reason why Anupama and KRK gave this movie 3 stars. Which is funny because I never thought I'd have the same opinion with the both of them at the same time for a movie that was a huge disappointment for everyone else. At the same time, I think there was a bit too much hysteria for this movie. I don't want to sound like I'm defending Anu or KRK because I disagree with them all the time. I mean, the 8th wonder of the world is how Anu gave Befikre 3.5 stars, which is truly a legendary feat of accomplishment. But you guys know that giving a movie 3 out of 5 stars is just a nice way of saying how mediocre a movie was. Remember, 3 out of 5 is 60%. But judging by the way some people lose their minds over critic ratings, you'd think that they gave Kalank a B. 3 out of 5 is a D, not a B. And if you are wondering, since Kalank was a guilty pleasure for me, I'd rate it a 6.9 out of 10. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Did you think my comparison between Titanic and Kalank was too much of a reach? Cause I don't. And what's the one thing you would change about Kalank if you were the director? Personally, I would have killed off Sonakshi's character way earlier. Anyway, let me know in the comments, subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope to see you next time.